Welcome to our second annual video questions and answers about the social justice vestry motion. I'm Elin Golden. I am the social justice and advocacy consultant for the Diocese of Toronto, and with me are several members of our social justice and advocacy committee and poverty reduction subcommittee of the diocese. Here are some of the questions that we've been getting from emails and questions from people around the diocese about this year's motion. This year's motion calls for social assistance rates in the province of Ontario to be doubled. That sounds really generous, is it?
That's an interesting question. It does sound like it might be. We do need to keep in mind that since dramatic cuts to social assistance back in the late 1990s, increases such as there have not even been close to the rate of inflation or cost of living increases. So people on social assistance have fallen further and further behind every year. Currently, a single person receiving Ontario Works gets a maximum benefit of $733 a month, which is 40% of the poverty line and not enough to afford accommodation, even in most of the province. Doubling the rates for such a person would bring them up to 80% of the poverty line, still significantly below. A single person on Ontario Disability Support Program receives $1,228 a month, which is 60% of the poverty line. So a doubling for a single ODSP recipient would take them slightly above the poverty line. But even leaving aside why we as a society have decided that someone with a permanent disability should live in permanent poverty, the 15% over the poverty line doesn't account for extra costs associated with disability. In 2017-2018, participants in Ontario's basic income pilot received $1,415.75 monthly. That was a few years ago. Inflation has bitten since then. Those with disabilities received $1,915 a month. People have talked eloquently about how even such a relatively small increase really was life-changing for them. In 2020-2021, the base rate for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit serve was $2,000 a month. So that was actually determined to be the amount a person needs to live a decent, dignified life in 2020-2021. Doubling social assistance rates would be in line with this level of benefits, although still in many cases below. Families on social assistance, which include children, do get increased basic needs and shelter amounts. They're also eligible for federal and provincial child benefits. Child benefits have played an important role in reducing child poverty. We're actually not asking in this motion for these benefits to be doubled, only the basic needs and shelter amount, which is currently paid under Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support Program. Clearly, if your vestry chose to ask for more increases or greater increases, we would not stand in your way.
Thank you for that, but how much would such an adjustment cost?
Good question. As you can imagine, there's a lot of debate about that among policy experts because there are a lot of different factors in play, like how the related benefits and clawbacks on earned income would be structured. But a ballpark estimate is around $8 billion. But, and this is important, the impact of this spending would be dramatically offset by reduced pressure on other public services, things like healthcare, shelter, the justice system. And when you put more money into the hands of people with low incomes, people who are much more likely to spend that money locally on basic needs, there's a strong multiplier effect for the whole of the provincial economy. Now, as a result of combinations of these different factors, research suggests that the current level of poverty in Ontario is actually costing the province between 27 and 33 billion every year. That's 27 and 33 billion compared with the 8 billion we're talking about this increase costing. So the question is really more like, can we afford to keep people at the current level of legislated poverty? Raising the rates would benefit not just the people who are on social assistance, which is important, but also the province as a whole.
So thank you, Andrea. A lot of people would say that the current situation is intolerable. And there are a lot of organizations, including faith-based organizations and many others who work with the unhoused, the marginalized, people suffering from food insecurity, who have called for an increase in rates, who have called for it for some time. So as well as passing this motion, what else can we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Inspired. You can contact your local MPP and ask to meet them and discuss this issue. And if the MPP won't see you, you could try to write them, and as constituents and let them know your concerns. You can just talk to friends and family and neighbors about the issue and let them know how serious it is. Many people have this impression that social assistance is much more generous than it actually is. You can join as well as support local organizations like food banks, legal clinics, or anti-poverty coalitions who are also raising awareness. Some of them might be involved in additional actions such as rallies or marches. So there are ways to get involved and raise your voice.
Thanks for that. That's very helpful. We've also had a question come in asking more basically, do we have any evidence that our Vestry motions make a practical difference? Does anyone in government even respond to us? And if not, why do we do it?
Well, it is true that government doesn't always respond immediately. But that's not to say that Vestry motions don't make a difference. There's several policy changes, including the increases in the provincial minimum wage and the federal legislation adopting and implementing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that came about in response to growing public support, in which our diocesan Vestry motions played a formative role from the early stages. Even when government doesn't respond, we still think the Vestry motions are important. They're opportunities for us to learn about justice issues affecting those in our neighborhoods and communities, and to speak out in public witness on those issues. We believe we are called to do good and seek justice, regardless of the outcome.
Thank you for that. Assuming we pass the motion, what happens next?
Well, let us know. Have your incumbent check the relevant box on page 3 of the incumbent's annual return. You can also email me as the social justice and advocacy consultant. And if you change the motion, which every parish is entitled to do if they wish, if you make any changes to the wording of it, please let me know what those changes are. That helps us know how to count it. The names of all the parishes which vote in favor of the motion are collected from these returns and emails, And based on the parish returns, we have a rough idea of how many people are represented. The results are then reported to senior diocesan leadership, including the College of Bishops, and communicated to the Anglican diocese through the diocesan newspaper. The results of the motion inform our advocacy over the next year, and in fact, often for the next several years. We write to the Premier and, in this case, the Minister for Community Services, outlining our concerns and urging them to act. We also would include the results of the motion in our provincial pre-budget submissions and responses to the provincial budget, and those go out over the bishop's name. We will also continue to advocate for this increase during meetings that we might have with provincial MPPs. In addition to all that, our advocacy on this issue also raises the profile of the issue in local and provincial coalitions of which we are part. So for instance, when the Interfaith Social Assistance Reform Coalition, or perhaps one of our FaithWorks ministry partners, calls for an increase in social assistance rates, they can point to our work on this motion to demonstrate that this has strong support from Anglicans within their network. Those are the questions we've received this year on this year's Social Justice Vestry motion. We hope that you've enjoyed this video and that it helps answer some of the questions you might have. Please feel free to reach out to me at egolden, EGOULDEN, at toronto.anglican.ca if you have further questions or to report the results of your motion. Thank you.